To know that we know what we know, and to know that we do not know what we do not know, that is true knowledge. This is Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish-born Renaissance philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician. He was born the youngest child in 1473. His father died early in his life, so his maternal uncle took him under his wing and saw to his education. He studied art, math, and medicine, but didn't care for astrophysics for a long time. He studied the mathematical works of Aristotle, Ptolemy, Euclid, and many others, though he left his university without taking a degree and then went to begin an ecclesiastic career in Italy. There he studied canon law and philosophical pursuits at the Collegiate Church of the Holy Cross. He completed his studies, and by the time he was 30 he moved to Warmia, which is modern-day northern Poland. He became a secretary and caretaker per his uncle from 1503 to 1510, where he began to work on his heliocentric theories. Here he plotted the orbits of Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter, and came very close to their arcs. These observations were key in realizing that their orbits did not follow Ptolemy's model. Ptolemy was an astronomer born in 100 AD in Alexandria, Egypt. He believed that all the stars were set at a fixed distance from Earth and that everything was held in by the sphere of the prime mover. He believed all planets were the same distance from each other and that they orbited the Earth in what were called eccentrics and epicycles. In Ptolemy's model of the universe, planets were expected to move in small circles called epicycles, represented by the red ring, around an imaginary object, the purple dot. The red object in the epicycle represents a planet orbiting Earth. The purple circle is called the deferent, which is basically the equivalent of an orbit. The Sun is orbiting the Earth, represented by the yellow dot. And as is now obvious, this model was very incorrect. After his uncle's death in 1512, Copernicus began to work at the Archcathedral Basilica in Frombork. This picture shown here is entitled Copernicus's Conversations with God. Pictured in the back is the Archcathedral. This also is the place where Copernicus began work on his most famous book, De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, or On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres. In the very center of that picture, you can see Copernicus's final diagram of the orbits of the planets, published in De Revolutionibus. This is the heliocentric model of the universe published in 1543, with the Sun in the center, the planets orbiting it, and the Moon orbiting the Earth. This diagram was not completely correct, however. He believed the orbits were perfectly circular, but this allowed for the conclusion that the planet's distance from the Sun was directly correlated to the time it took for one revolution. In his model, Saturn was the farthest planet from the Sun, as Uranus and Neptune had not been discovered. And while this model was mostly incorrect, it was much closer to the truth. Though not everyone immediately accepted Copernicus's model of the solar system. Johannes Kepler, a German-born 17th century astronomer and mathematician, was an adamant defender of Copernican theory. He published the Mysterium Cosmographicum, or the Cosmographic Mystery. It was Kepler's first major work on astronomy, and one of his first works in support of the heliocentric model of the solar system. This picture is one of the first 3D models of the solar system, which he created to explain elliptical orbits. Another great successor to Copernican theory was Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei. In his book Dialogue Concerning Two Chief World Systems, he firmly defended heliocentrism. During his life, De Revolutionibus and other books containing heliocentric theories were prohibited. He was put on trial in 1633 for heresy, and all of his writings were banned, including any he may write in the future. The publishment of De Revolutionibus was not met with immediate controversy, however. Bartolomeo Spina, Magister of the Holy Palace in the Catholic Church, expressed a desire to stamp out the Copernican doctrine in 1545. While Spina died in 1546, his friend Dominican Giovanni Maria Torresani of the Convent of St. Mark in Florence, pictured here, began to refute Copernicus's theory as well. His main rebuttal to Copernicus's theory was an argument based on philosophy and theology, not science. He believed that Copernican theories were completely false because they were scientifically unfounded. According to Torresani, Copernicus simply assumed the movements of Earth, and his calculations were in direct contradiction with the current believed physics. Though this backfired, as when people began to study Copernican theory, the entire field of physics was rethought. Torresani had many religious oppositions to heliocentrism, most of which arose from biblical references, such as Psalms 104:5. The Lord set the earth on its foundations, it can never be moved. Further, Ecclesiastes 1:5 states that, and the sun sets and returns to its same place. Though the most influential arguments against Copernicus came from an Italian priest named Francesco Angoli. He was commissioned to write an essay in 1616 to Galileo presenting more than 20 arguments against Copernican theory. In it, he used physics, mathematics, and theology. Galileo wrote back, but he only refuted the physical and mathematical arguments. In March of 1616, before Galileo's 1633 trial, the Roman Catholic Church issued a decree banning De Revolutionibus because Copernicanism was false Pythagorean doctrine altogether contrary to the Holy Scripture, and it should not creep any further into the prejudice of Catholic truth. It It wasn't until 1758 that De Revolutionibus was removed from the list of banned books, though it was still heavily censored, along with all the other writings that spoke of heliocentrism, including Galileo's dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. Those prohibitions were dropped in 1835, allowing for people to read them without scorn or excommunication. In 1543, apoplexy and paralysis seized Copernicus, and he died being 70. It is stated that just before he died, he was presented with the final printed pages from De Revolutionibus, and after awaking from a coma, read the pages and then died. It was only then that De Revolutionibus was published, and it is likely that he was afraid of retribution from the Church, so he withheld his book until he was on his deathbed. Copernicus's work was one of the many used by Pope Gregory VIII to reform the calendar in 1582 AD. Without it, we would be off a day every 128 years, and eventually all of our seasons would be off. Additionally, his ideas were key in the Age of Enlightenment movement of the 1700s, where sciences, arts, philosophy, and other practices featured rationality and reason to further their fields. Again, in the 1750s, the Church allowed for his book to be read, albeit censored, which allowed for other people to understand the model of heliocentrism and how it applies to then modern science. The paradigm shift that followed Copernicus's discoveries were profound in the formation of the scientific world as we know it today. His ideas were some of the first that catered to the scientific belief as it is, and not how he wanted it to be. Rather than bending to the wills of the Church or to the narrative that was believed at the time, he discovered something new and changed the world for the better. Thank you.